It is still considered a major hurricane, Category 3 and above. But this stayed at Category 5 for the better part of 3 days. You could expect that we would see some variation in its intensity, its central pressure, maybe the movement, and indeed we have, because it has interacted with these various land masses. But still, just staggering in its appearance as we look at it on the enhanced satellite imagery. 155-mile-per-hour winds with it, gusts up to 190 as it barrels across the southern edges of the Bahamas. Now, we've been looking at the European models, we've been looking at the North American model, and I want to show you those because they both have updated. They both are giving us different pieces of information. Let's just draw a line through the center of Florida and see what happens with the European model. Goes in right around the Florida Keys, towards the Everglades, and just to the western edge of the center of Florida. So it tweaks just a little bit towards the left, as opposed to the American model, which brings it in towards Miami, Dade County, 2.5 million people there. We go further up the coast, 2 million people, and then up towards Palm Beach County. So this brings it in just to the east of the center of the Florida Peninsula. So who has to worry about it? Everybody, from coast to coast, from the Atlantic to the Gulf of Mexico, because 75 miles from the center, we're looking at these Category 4 hurricane intense winds. So we bring it on in when? Maybe late Saturday, maybe into the early morning hours of Sunday as a Category 4. And then nowhere that you travel across the Florida Peninsula will you escape this major hurricane. And the window, we've asked repeatedly, I've been asked repeatedly, is it too late to leave? It's not too late if you aren't worried about gas or food or the winds or flying projectiles. If you're in a high rise where the wind is going to be considerably stronger, 20 to 30%, depending on how high up you go. And then as it moves further towards the north for Georgia, the impact here, but already in South Carolina, my beloved South Carolina, the impacts are possible here as well. In Charleston, in Savannah, towards Jacksonville, into Georgia, Columbus, all the way up towards Atlanta as a tropical storm. And then we have to talk about Katia and Jose that are both strengthening. That's right. And we've got these 3 systems to talk about.
Even though it's come down in a category, all that is meteorology. It's still a very, very destructive hurricane that really shows no signs of stopping. And I'm not convinced that it's not going to go back up to Category 5 strength, even though it is not forecast to do so. Let's get you updated this morning on what's going on. First of all, again, Miami-Dade evacuation orders 650,000 residents. That makes it the biggest or largest attempted evac in Miami-Dade County history. Miami-Dade County history. Okay, 650,000. Fort Lauderdale International will cease operation, which means no flights in, no flights out at 7:45 today. So hopefully you've got a flight if you're planning on getting out of there before then. If not, you're driving. 4,000 commercial airline flights in Irma's path have been canceled. And Florida's governor has ordered all public schools, colleges, and universities to close Friday through Monday. And again, it is stuff like that. It is stuff like giving priority access and basically escorts to the gas trucks to get into these evacuation areas that Governor Scott has set the tone how he expects out of the state and how he's preparing his state. My compliments to the governor. And Stephanie, again, this place is like, for Miami, this is like a ghost town around here. I mean, seriously, it's absolutely unbelievable.
That's good news, Jim. That's good. I'm glad everyone was heeding the warnings. You know, I want to give props to everyone in the government and locals, Jim. It seems like this is really working well, and that's nice to see as we head into the after part when we don't have electricity. There might be gas available, but you might not be able to pump it out because there's no electricity. I want to give you one little tip. I'm going to try to give you a little tip throughout the morning hours. Fill your bathtub with water, not to consume, but to use to flush your toilets. Take a bucket, dump it in the back. You'll be able to flush. It will really make a difference when you don't have power. People could be without power for months here. That is not out of the question. Let's talk about Hurricane Irma, a Category 5 for 3 days. That actually ties the record for the longest lasting Category 5 in the Atlantic with Ivan in 2004 and Allen in 1980. So this has been a beast. It's down to a Category 4. We'll tell you that in just a minute. First, We want to go to the Publix in Hollywood, Florida. New shipments coming in. Publix is set to close several stores in South Florida ahead of Irma. And by the way, props to all these employees who have been working so hard to help their communities here. You can check the status on a store on the public websites. Locations in the Keys are already closed. So many people trying to help out their community when they need to be preparing as well. So Irma, as a 5 a.m. update, it is now a Category 4, winds at 155 miles an hour. A Cat 5 is 157. So we're right borderline, and we're going to see that intensity fluctuate and go up and down. And even if you live in North Florida, this could be a Cat 1 when it's in North Florida. It could be a tropical storm in Georgia. So it's very strong. It's very potent here, moving west-northwest at 16 miles per hour.
You want to get out.
Now, with this thing being so big and so strong, those wave heights up to 20, 30, even 40 feet, close to the center of it. So 10-foot building, that's basically a one-story building is about 10 feet. Okay, so that gives you an idea of how high those waves are. Surge here, 5 to 10 feet off the coast of Florida. Even while this is pulling away, on the back side of this system, you're going to get that onshore push. Now, the last time we had a Cat 4 landfall in Florida was Charlie. That was back in 2004 on the west coast of Florida. Wilma was a Cat 3 at landfall, and we saw a lot of damage with that. We do have warnings that are posted in the Bahamas, also here in Florida.
Yeah, I'm glad everybody's evacuating from the Miami area.
There's an eye wall replacement, meaning the eyes kind of gets its act back together.
Because it's probably going to go across there.
And hurricane force winds, yesterday were extending out 50 miles from the center. Now it's 70 miles from the center. So with an eye wall replacement, you can get that wind field to expand. Tropical storm force winds out 185 miles from the center. So it's a big system going right up the center, even to the left or the right. Everyone's going to feel the effects here inland and at the coast. Quickly look at the satellite and that radar showing those bands coming into Florida. A lot of people asking me about timing, and we are going to see the bands coming in tonight into tomorrow. So get everything prepared now. Look how concentric that is. Just unbelievable. The worst days are going to be Sunday into Monday from South Florida to North Florida, respectively. And rainfall could be
Everyone
8
stay
to 12
safe.
inches.
I'm going to keep you updated.
Of course, Jim, people can always go to social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram,
go to,
Stephanie Abrams,
Charles
Snapchat, Stephanie TWC, and that's where we'll be able to post as much information as we can until
I'll keep you updated. So yeah, that's where you want to go right here. Thanks.
Good Thursday afternoon. It is September 7th. Your latest update here on Hurricane Irma, still a major Category 5 storm, but I want to start off with something I thought was pretty cool. Here at the onset of the storm, as it approached the islands, the northern Leeward Islands and Guadeloupe, there are seismometers there. Those are designed to detect earthquakes. As Irma got close, it was actually detected by the seismometers. Now, what happens is the extreme winds that are associated with a storm of that size create sound waves that in turn vibrate the ground and were detected by these seismometers. To be clear, the storm did not cause an earthquake itself, and this isn't really unusual. Storms of this size and this magnitude typically do get detected by seismometers. Just this one in Guadeloupe was detectable for about 24 hours ahead of the storm. Pretty interesting there. That just gives you some sort of perspective there on how large and how strong the storm is. Here's the latest numbers for you. We're back to going off of 3-hour advisories here. So the last one is at 11 a.m. Winds have stepped back a little bit, 175 miles per hour. Right, that's good. Still well in the threshold of a Category 5 storm, 157 miles per hour or greater, so well in that. Gust at 215. Its central pressure hasn't really dropped off very much. So I want to stop it here and show you that it's looking pretty much the same that it's been for the last couple of days here, moving off to the west-northwest and eventually ending up somewhere north of Cuba. By that point, maybe weakening to a Category 4, maybe not, maybe still a Category 5. But at that point, we're going to look for a sharp turn to the north. This track is completely dependent from this point onwards of where that right-hand turn occurs. And how are we going to know that? Well, we're going to look at something in the jet stream and the whole overall setup in just a minute that'll kind of explain that and give you a little bit more of a bearing as to why this is so uncertain and this is so up in the air. Right now, we're looking at it cruising northwards along the east coast of Florida, possibly making a landfall somewhere around Miami, if not staying just offshore. And then a secondary landfall somewhere really within the South Carolina and Georgia state line. But this is just the median or the middle road of all the models here. It can be anywhere within this cone of uncertainty. The spread at that point in excess of 300 miles. So really the whole southeastern seaboard really under the gun here, and the threat level is rising. Now I want to talk again about the Saffir-Simpson scale, how we gauge the intensity of hurricanes based on the central pressure and, of course, the winds that are sustained within them. Right now, Category 5, anything from 157 miles an hour or greater. Now, just to give you some more perspective here, I'm going to show you something called the Enhanced Fujita Scale. This is what we use if you're in a severe weather market that you see severe weather and tornadoes. This is how they gauge the intensity of those. This is just for perspective purposes, because what we're dealing with here within Irma, really in the northeast quadrant and right outside the eye wall, the point of the strongest winds, are winds that are as strong as an EF4 tornado that just last a whole lot longer. So obviously, houses being leveled, structures just blown off of their foundations. What we saw in Barbuda, over 90% of the structures on that island were just wiped out. 1,600 people live on that island. Still no word yet on if all of them made it out safely. And unfortunately, likely the case, we probably lost some lives there. In fact, the death toll in Irma so far is around 10 lives lost. Now, we're talking about the storm direction movement here and also where you're going to find the strongest winds. I talked about those winds gusting to 200 miles per hour likely being found in that northeast quadrant. The reason, you got to factor in the storm movement and the storm direction here. Its momentum will add to those overall gusts. So you're getting a storm movement, say 15, 20 miles per hour. You add that right in to the strongest gusts you're seeing, and you're going to add on to that. Now I'm going to show you something new here. This is our tropical tracker that has a new filter put on it, and this is a computer model that's trying to show us here where the winds are. So the yellow shading is the boundary of where you're going to find tropical storm force winds. The orange boundary is where you're going to find winds of 54 or 58 miles an hour or greater. And then the red here, right around the center, is where you're going to find hurricane force winds, which is 74 miles per hour or greater. Although this isn't the best model, because I think the wind field is a little bit larger, especially for the hurricane force, it does show a general direction here and does get to the point I want to bring up that as storms move poleward or north, the sustained winds may go down, but the wind field spreads out as that happens. So a much larger area will experience much stronger winds rather than just a confined area right around the eye and the eye wall. So that's something to note there, because this storm will be heading north in its lifetime before it makes landfall. Here's how it looks on the satellite imagery. It's the infrared here showing the really cold top clouds surrounding the entire eye wall. Not as symmetric as it was yesterday, but still a very impressive and very large storm. In fact, from the outermost bands, we're getting a storm diameter here of 670 miles per hour. Again, all about perspective. Let's go up and see how far that is. That's from Chicago to New York. That's how large that storm is. It is a monster, and it's only going to grow in size as it continues to spread out that wind field as it goes poleward. Close-up look here, that eye about 60 miles off the coast of the Dominican Republic. That's some good news, because the strongest winds are staying offshore, but certainly dealing with some storm surge and some issues there. And then Turks and Caicos, a very similar setup to what we saw yesterday with St. Martin. The eye is heading pretty much directly at the island there within the next 6 hours or so. So keep them in your thoughts and prayers. Out ahead of it, hurricane warnings up for the entire Bahamas, and we've added hurricane watches now. The first in the United States proper, that in southern Florida and Key West. These will likely be upgraded to a hurricane warning as the event draws closer. So let's refresh ourselves again on what watch and warning means. A watch means the risk of hazardous weather is there, likely about 48 hours in advance. Once it gets upgraded to a warning, very urgent. The event is occurring, imminent, or is likely, and this is usually within 36 hours of the arrival of tropical weather. Again, we talked about this yesterday. I want to preface it again with this is not a depiction of Irma or where it is heading. This is mainly just for demonstrative purposes, okay? Let's talk about storm surge, because you're going to hear more about that as the storm gets closer to making landfall, not only on the islands of Turks and Caicos, but the United States as well. So what happens with storm surge and why it's so dangerous, in fact, it's the deadliest part of hurricanes, is wind constantly blowing. Sustained winds in Irma, 175 miles per hour. So that's a constant force on the ocean, and that piles up the water, and once it encounters a coastline, it throws it right up and over onto land, houses, and you factor that in with a high tide, an astronomical high tide, full moon, it gets even worse. Factors that are not really going to limit Irma from keeping its same intensity, if not strengthening just a little bit more in the coming days, are the very warm waters that continue to be present out here in the Bahamas. We're talking temperatures 86, 87, 88, 89. That is extremely warm water, and each degree you go up is a significant increased amount of energy available to be used for these storms that develop. All right, let's now go back to what I was talking about earlier in that hard right-hand turn to the north and why timing that is so hard, and also showing what that does to the impact of the overall track is a little bit difficult as well. First, let's explain what you're looking at here. This is the jet stream map, or upper level winds. Think of the jet stream as a big river of air, okay? It's a current of air well above our heads. In fact, that's where jets fly. That's why it takes a little bit shorter of a time to get from LA to New York than it does from New York to get to LA, because you're going against the jet stream there. That's a whole different conversation. But first, these are the jet stream winds and what's going to be driving the movement of Irma from this point forward. So there's Irma, as you see in the bottom of your screen there, bottom right-hand screen. Big area of high pressure also sitting out over the open Atlantic. That's been driving its westward movement for the past week or so. But as we get through the next few days, we're going to see a trough starting to dig its way south. You see the wind stream here, and what's going to happen is it's going to pick up Irma, and a small opening is going to be opened up within that ridge of high pressure that's out over the Atlantic, and Irma's going to take that chance and dive north. So that could possibly drive it anywhere into the southeast coastline or even through Florida there. That's why it's such a huge spread right now, because just timing exactly how strong that trough is and when it actually has some sort of significant movement on Irma is really hard to gauge right now. Each hour, each 6 hours that we get closer to the event, it gets a little bit more clear on the computer models. On top of that, we have Jose out there. Hurricane now, Category 1 storm, expected to become a major hurricane Category 3, moving over the same warm waters that Irma did that spawned its phenomenal growth. And I would not be surprised if Jose gets even a little bit stronger than it's forecast to do. Why this is so unfortunate is because it's headed in the exact same direction that Irma did, the islands that just got whacked just yesterday. So hurricane watch is back up for Antigua and Barbuda. Barbuda, 90% of those buildings on that island were wiped clean. And then behind it there, tropical storm watches are up as well. So really got to watch this closely. Here's how it looks on the big picture. I mean, not too far behind Irma, about 1,200 miles behind. So that brings up to light, you know, can these storms catch up to one another and become one? Although very, very unlikely, because the distance is far too great right now, it's possible. Can two hurricanes collide? Short answer is yes. It's something called the Fujiwara effect, and that's when two storms get close enough of similar intensity, not the exact same strength, though, because one always has to be stronger. They reach a central point somewhere within 500 miles of each other, and they start to orbit one another. And then eventually that orbit shrinks, and the stronger of the two storms absorbs the other. So it's possible, but very unlikely here with Jose and Irma. All right, that's all I got to say here. Thanks for watching. Join the conversation here on social media. Meteorologist Tim Pandages and 13 Tim Pandages on Twitter if you got any questions. Thanks for watching.
And this is way stronger than what we saw with Hurricane Louis in 1995. So in St. John's, not busy today. It's a ghost town.
Island of Barbuda taking a direct hit from Hurricane Irma. More than 90% of the island, homes, buildings destroyed. And tonight, listen to this. Hurricane Jose is now on a path to hit that same island. Just moments ago, I spoke with the Prime Minister, Gaston Brown, with now an urgent effort underway trying to get everyone out. Prime Minister Brown, thanks for joining us. And the pictures coming in are just devastating. I know you've had a chance to fly over the island and to visit it in person. Describe what you saw for us.
Yeah, well, for me, I never contemplated that we could have had such damages. I mean, the Barbuda landscape was just totally decimated. I mean, 90% or more of the buildings were damaged. I mean, it literally destroyed the country.
Mr. Prime Minister, I know you described it as though a bomb went off on that island, and we are all watching the track now of Hurricane Jose, which could get to that island as well. Just incredible that you could be facing two hurricanes now. You're trying to get everyone off the island?
Well, we are. We are being proactive. In fact, already the evacuation has taken place mid-morning, no later than midday tomorrow. We'll literally have the island completely evacuated.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for your time. I know you're very busy. And please make sure the people of your island know that they're in our thoughts and prayers.
Many thanks.
Right now on the phone, I've got Key West, Florida Chief of Police Donald Lee Jr. He joins me now. Welcome to the show, Chief Lee.
Thank you.
So how are these preparations for Irma different than storm preparations you and your department have made in the past?
Well, certainly we've never faced a storm of this magnitude any time that I can remember, and you know, this is the most powerful storm that's ever been in the Atlantic Basin. We certainly over the years have had a lot of practice, and we've had a lot of close calls, and we've had actual hurricanes that have hit us, but preparing for this one is just a little bit different and a little scarier. But we are making all the preparations that need to be in place. We are pretty much prepared. We are currently under a hurricane watch, which we could expect possibly tropical force storm winds within 48 hours. We're currently under a mandatory evacuation of all residents in Key West.
And people in Key West, I've been there, it's a beautiful part of the state. I love it because there's such a strong, independent theme and lifestyle there, which makes, obviously, some of the residents of the Florida Keys very different than other residents of Florida. How are you talking to them, convincing them to get out, and how effective have the mandatory evacuations been?
Well, as you mentioned, a good portion of our community are independent and you know, sometimes have minds of their own. But so far, we are encouraged by the number of residents that have evacuated, but we are concerned because there are still many residents on the island. So it's a bit concerning to us. We're going out doing everything possible, trying to encourage everyone to leave. There's still time. We still have today. We still have tomorrow morning for them to evacuate. We are explaining to them the dire consequences should we be struck directly by this hurricane, which is still possible.
And what happens, Chief Lee, what happens if the Keys take a direct hit? Walk us through that.
Well, if we take a direct hit, it's going to be devastating to us. It's going to have catastrophic consequences to this island. I mean, there's going to be tremendous storm surge and wind, and it's just going to be catastrophic, like nothing this island has ever experienced. And we're trying to tell the residents that are still here that they stay at their own risk, because as of tomorrow at 7 a.m., there are no hospitals open in all of Monroe County. So we're not going to be able to put first responders at risk to come rescue them and without having, you know, any medical facilities or any ability to air evacuate first responders out. So we're trying to explain to them, those folks that are still left behind, some of the life and death consequences of their decision not to evacuate. But there's still time. We have buses that are evacuating people on the street right now around town and taking them to shelters in Miami.
Very good. So there you have it. They are awesome. They are not immortal. You have your hands full. I'll let you get back to it. Thank you so much, Chief Lee.